the best that I can reconstruct. It began in a suburb of the Mauthausen concentration camp, Gunskirchen, in Upper Austria, where I'd been locked into the forest until we were freed by Japanese-American soldiers. And I first heard about the telepathic cinema. After that, I traveled to Berlin, where I caught a train to the east. I traveled in the two directions to the end of the east. Where I crossed a river heading west, and thus I passed through the bridges of Yiddish Siberia near China until I arrived on the magnetic island of Japanese Manchuria, floating in the steam above northeast China. Japanese Manchuria was an empty country, filled with unmoving forests, occasional temples, and people in the process of forgetting. The Japanese lived on the railroads, built to run on mobile tracks they reassembled every day. The trains were self-sufficient cities, and the country extended a few feet on either side of the mobile train tracks. This was the Pure Land Motion Railroad. The country had been closed since 1931, when the railroad had been bombed. The Japanese nationalized the country and built a permanent city for the trains called Shinkyo, which is where the frog lived, dancing the telepathic ballets, which were created by the movie talkers of the Manchu Edison Film Corporation, like the Toyoshi triplets, who were a single brain in three bodies. Toyoshi triplet Simcoe said that Thomas Edison had been on the train when the bomb went off and had lost his hearing. And while resting in Shinkyo Hospital, he had invented the silent sound film, the source of the telepathic cinema of Manchuria. But that's not true. Simcoe had stolen Edison films and brought them to Manchuria, and now the Manchu Edison Film Corporation made films for the Manchurian movie talkers. Toyoshi triplet Hayim said that, back then, movie talkers were animators who told the story next to the screen, explaining the stories, the old stories, and the new ones in the new city of Shinkyo. This is what he told me when I arrived in Shinkyo, or Shinking, Newtown, the destination city for every train, and where movies were made. I arrived at the Planetarium Central Station during the 10th anniversary celebration of the explosion. Animators and other studio employees were marching to the silent sound stages. Toyoshi triplet Togo said that the studios ran day and night in modern buildings filled with machinery provided by the Pure Land Motion Railroad. Togo worked in the telepathic cinema in the Wind Tunnel Theater, where artificial wind and unmoving trains were used to make films for movie talkers. That's where I met the Amerpest triplets. I remember riding the trains in Shinkyo with Amerpest triplet Machiko, talking about telepathy. And once in a while, we saw other worlds through the walls. No one lived in those places, and the train always brought us back to the planetarium central station. I remember sitting with Amor Pest triplet Angelet at that station, watching movies through the glass ceiling of the train, while the dolls danced in the sky. I remember the story of the transit of Venus, an invisible eclipse you could only see in Manchuria that year, and a movie that explained telepathy came from words that spoke themselves. But I didn't understand. It was Amor Pest triplet Li Jung who said, Manchu Edison dolls used the Pure Land Motion Railroad to draw themselves during the invisible eclipses, and then they danced around the track. Movie talker films were often made during the eclipses by people in the process of forgetting. For it was when the movie talkers spoke that the audience forgot, and the knots appeared. Li Jung explained that Manchu Edison films existed in single copies. As the projector played the movie talker film, hydrogen rays traveled from the headlight of the projector into the eyes of the movie talker, and there in the brain were the grains of thought that burned and made the story. The dots entered the eyes of the audience, where they became many times at the same place, inside the muscles of the eye and the brain. Silent sound was recorded using amplified speakers connected to the gasless tubes of silent carbon microphones made from explosive coal by Manchu Edison. Teeny knots were collected on metal inside the tubes, and these knots were transmitted to the brains of the movie talkers, who could hear the invisible sounds. Identical sounds appeared in both ears of the audience at once, and were turned into spirals. These spirals could be drawn by the movie talkers on the brains of the forgetting audience. Sounds were made by other movie talkers behind the screen, using spiral machines. And local singers sang through pipes from the basement, while the audience joined along in famous friendship songs. In the Manchurian telepathic cinema, movie talker movies were watched by audiences that could hear themselves forgetting. The movie talkers spoke, and the audience forgot, while the silent music played, and the knots told the story of the movie. I remember this because one day, during the production of a volcano movie, the frog told me that I had come to the floating island of Manchuria to make the greatest of all the lost telepathic films. A movie talker movie that would be called The Lost Tribes. This was true, but that was other times, and I had only just found the telepathic cinema of Manchuria.